Hello, this is my sports coaching assignment. So the roles of a coach, the first one is motivator. This is somebody who motivates athletes and participants to reach their capabilities, also pushing them to new boundaries, allowing them to be more successful individually or as a team. It is also important for them to keep their athletes motivated throughout their whole season by setting targets and so they keep reaching their goals. They'll provide praise and positive feedback, but also giving negative when needed. It is finding the positives when only the negatives is seen in the performer. An example of a good motivator would be my coach at my gym. He persistently motivates me and develops new skills and goals so that I am always motivated. It is so important to be a motivator as a coach because this person is the one who pushes the athlete, making them successful and constantly putting in the hard work and effort. If the coach was not a motivator and didn't keep the athlete motivated, then the athlete themselves would begin to lack hope in themselves and they wouldn't be motivated themselves. Second one is a friend. Being a friend as well as a coach is important because it provides them psychological and emotional support alongside with the physical. They need to be approachable so that the athlete is able to ask questions, talk to them, or talk about any problems. It is important for them to have some confidentiality too, keeping personal information to themselves, keeping respect for the athlete, making sure the boundaries aren't overmarked. Predominantly, it is all about trust. As athletes are constantly working hard, it is important for the coach to provide support as well as pushing them to reach their goals. They need emotional support to know that they are cared for and they feel safe and in a good environment, not just being told what to do by a stranger that doesn't care. An example of a good coach would be Tony Minichio, Jessica Ennis's coach. He is a good friend as well as a coach, but he got her to an Olympian from working with her since she was 13. Then recently, having a baby, she came back and went for it again, getting a silver, which again he would have had to provide emotional support for her as she needed pushing to be a successful athlete, but also needed to provide emotional support for her as she is now a mum. Third is a role model. The overall job of a role model is to set a good example. They need to turn up on time to sessions, plan their sessions correctly and effectively, providing the team athlete to look up to. For example, if a coach was aggressive or a rude person, the athletes will also act in this way because they act as their role models. If the coach were lazy, didn't bother, was not interested in pushing the athlete to get them to be successful, then the athlete wouldn't push themselves. In almost every situation, players will look up to their coaches as a source of inspiration and knowledge, especially children. Being a role model is very important for a coach because they set standards. The coach must believe in their athlete from a role model point of view, for the athlete to follow and believe in their coach. A good role model is Mourinho, who has all his players' phone numbers to check up on them whilst being a persistent coach, getting them to be successful. He's provided a good, successful career, and he supposedly had Frank Lampard called Frank Lampard after hearing of his family problems, but making sure he was kept motivated um, as as a player in the team. He provided a very good role model figure over the team, which is so important, especially when working with team sports, as each player needs someone to look up to. Fourth is a manager. They are responsible for overlooking and knowing the players, including their strengths and weaknesses. Ultimately, a good coach must be all of the roles above. Without athletes having a team manager, they wouldn't be playing at games or won't be getting put up against their oppositions, which will make them successful. They make sure that they have the correct training facilities, equipment, and make sure that they are provided with the best coaches, nutritionists, and physios. Without them, the team would fall apart and they would not get anywhere or be successful. Pep Guardiola is a good manager because he actually banned all mobile phones at Man City's training so that the team would chat with each other so that they got to know each other better and therefore work as one when playing football. Distinction. Overall, I think that role models are more influential on non-elite teams because they will be working with children who are less motivated participants because they are not professional, unlike elite. Children need a role model as they will look up to their coach and be influenced as to how they act during sport. Elite athletes will not look up to their coach as much as the role model because they are professional and they have their own motivation from being successful. Non-elite teams working with children are young and immature, meaning that they can easily be influenced and therefore need a good, reliable role model for them to look up to and aspire to be like. However, in elite sport, the role of a manager is more important because they need to organise teams, the facilities and equipment to use, which is important for an elite team who will be competing against other elite teams. They make sure they have the best coaches and physios, whereas non-elite do not need these, as they will not be playing at a high level where they will need them. A non-elite team would benefit from a friend because a lot of children or disadvantaged people go to local sports clubs, teams or gyms because it is an environment that they feel safe in and is a release of stress. In comparison to an elite team, they would not benefit as much because they are professional and have many supportive people around them, as it is their livelihood, and training will be their lives, so they have a lot of people working with them, so their coach being a friend is not always that beneficial to them as they are elite. It is important for a coach to be a friend, as it is someone that participants can talk to, they can be supported to and focus on enjoying themselves during sport. They also provide emotional support, which is important to have, especially for children and disadvantaged people, providing a trustworthy role for them. It is important for a coach to not be a stranger so that they can easily be approached and provide any support participants need. A motivator is both helpful for an elite and a motivator is both helpful for an elite and non-elite, because an elite would benefit from this because they constantly train and therefore they would get easily bored, as it is their life and pretty much all they do. So it is important for their coach to motivate them within their training by providing new objectives and goals to keep them focused on their training. A non-elite would also benefit from a motivator because they are not working at a high level to compete, so they could become demotivated as they're playing and they're only playing for fun or for the joy of it. This is important for when working with kids or disadvantaged backgrounds because they will be immature, not disciplined, and need a bit motivated to keep them focused on the sport and not just be messing around or doing nothing, which could demotivate them. They need to be disciplined and make sure that they are motivated to work hard when playing sport and training. However, overall I think non-elite teams will benefit more than this because they will be pushed not they will be pushed and keep focused when training a lot of the time and not working towards anything just for the fun of it, so as working not working towards anything, whereas the elite are always working to compete. The non-elite need to be pushed to focus on having fun but also staying focused on the sport and reaching some sort of target or goal. Responsibilities, professional conduct or behaviour. As a coach, you need to present yourself professionally. Professional manners in places like interviews, parents, or public places. It is important to have a professional conduct like these. Knowledge and experience, qualifications, look professional, effective communicator, respect all abilities, respect sporting officials. This can be similar into the role of a role model. They need to constantly present themselves correctly so the team or athlete knows how they are and they must listen to them, or they could lose respectfully, meaning they wouldn't listen or be a successful team or athlete. They also must always give a good impression to other teams, coaches, parents, and when being seen out in public if working with an elite team. If the coach constantly wanted to mess around and didn't have a professional manner in training sessions and outings with the team or athlete, then the performance would decrease massively and they would not be successful. This is especially important when working with children because they need to constantly be watched, told what to do and where, so they are not in danger, and also parents are putting the coach's trust in their hand, looking after these children and being left in charge of their safety and protection, which is why it is so important to have a professional conduct and behaviour. Health and safety. All coaches have a duty of care, a legal obligation imposed on an individual, requiring them to adhere to a standard of reasonable care while permitting any acts that could be harmful. Regulation of procedures to prevent accidents and injuries, checking the equipment, environments being played in for any harmful or dangerous objects. Intrinsic and extrinsic and intrinsic factors and the different injuries there are. It is also important for the coach to make sure that the equipment environment is safe because the health and safety of the players is in the coach's hand and they could potentially be blamed or even prosecuted in the health and safety regulations if they were not followed, and a player could seriously be injured. The coach, especially when working with kids or disabled people, needs to be watching the players, especially in the sports such as boxing or kickboxing, making sure that they are practicing and training in a safe and correct way. Otherwise, the athletes or players could easily be susceptible to an injury. As a coach, the player or athlete that you're in charge of needs looking after, and they're putting their safety and trust in your hands. Not only are you putting their trust in your hands, but also the parents of the kids when working with them and the carers of disabled people. This makes health and safety a huge part of a responsibility of being a coach. Equal opportunities. At a non-elite level, everyone needs to be given opportunities, whatever their ability. There must be no discrimination against racism, sex, ageism, ability, or religion. The language and attitude coaches use towards each team member should always be the same respectful manner, whatever gender or race or religion or age. For example, Newcastle Football Club have just received 4 new French players who speak little English, so the coach needs to provide as much support as he does to the other players, to the new French players, making sure they fully understand what they are doing and the rest of the team welcome them and they make them feel comfortable. This is such an important responsibility for a coach to have because it can increase the number of people participating in the club or team and giving people who can undertake supporting roles such as management or volunteering. It promotes the greater inclusion of different types of people such as disabled people with different races or ages. Therefore, this would give the team club a better reputation and the players' performance would increase, as they would be a fair all-round team and also gives a good amount of safety for the team by providing equal opportunities. It's important to have the knowledge of a coaching environment because they need to know things such as where the training facility, the equipment is, the location, and the location of essentials such as toilets and first aid. They must complete medical forms, which is very important when working with disabled people or children. For example, if a pitch is icy and no one turned up with the correct football boots, the coach must assess the area and see whether it is safe to play or not, assessing the risks or dangerous actions that could be taken. This is very important because the coach is in charge of the safety of the players and they must be aware of any risks or hazards around so that they know what environment they are working in and prevent players from injuring themselves. If a player was injured just before the final or a competitive match, the whole team could be affected, especially if more than one player was injured, which is a high risk when playing in dangerous weather. The coach needs to make sure that the shelter for the players the coach needs to make sure that a shelter for when playing outside or in heavy rain is there for the players to be safe and not become ill or injure themselves. Distinction. Health and safety is more important for a non-elite team because they could usually be dealing with younger participants who are more susceptible to injuring or hurting themselves because they are more immature, and it can be more of a risk to the coach when they are under 18. If they seriously hurt themselves, then the coach could be at risk of being sued for not putting them in a safe environment and checking any risks. They need to check the equipment, making sure it is safe for all children to use, as they can easily hurt themselves and will mess around and therefore have a higher chance of hurting themselves. In comparison to a non-elite team, they will be more mature and focused on their training and playing sport. They will not mess around as much because they will need to train to reach their goals, so that they need to train ready for competing, and therefore they will be less susceptible to injuring themselves. Although the elite teams are more mature, they will be less likely to injuring themselves, but they are high up, and means that if they did injure themselves and the coach was not being responsible, then they could sue them as they are professional, and there was a lot more money involved in this. Equal opportunities are more important for non-elite teams because they will have less confidence and they will also have a different mix of people. The non-elite teams will have different races, religions, genders and abilities, which makes it important for the coach to make sure he is always giving equal opportunities to everyone who is in the sporting session. This means they must include everyone, making sure it's fair, making sure every participant involved is enjoying themselves and fully understands the activity at hand. In comparison to an elite team, they will be of the same ability, which makes it easier for the coach to set them tasks and help them all develop so that they are on the same level. Although the elite teams will still also have different races and religions, which is shown in a sport like football, which the coaches have to adapt so that there is equal opportunity for all the players. For example, a player could be transferred from a foreign country and they might not speak a lot of English, So they need to make sure that the player fully understands what they are doing, giving them an equal